Well, I'm joined by Jonathan Phillips, who's the chair of the Adult Safeguarding Board in Bradford. So welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, David. It's great to be here.
Okay, maybe just say a little bit about what your journey was towards this, and how you're now the chair of the board here.
Okay, well, I spent a lifetime in social work. I was a social worker in Bradford, actually, where I now chair the board for many years. But then I left Bradford after a while because I wanted to see wider things, and I went to National Deaf Children's Society because one of my children is deaf, and so I've had a really big interest in deafness for a very long time. And from there went to the Social Services Inspectorate and got involved in things nationally, and the Commission for Social Care Inspection. And after a long time of being a regulator and making judgments about how directors and social services departments were performing, I thought, well, maybe I ought to try and do it myself. And so I was lucky to be appointed as Director of Adult Social Services in Calderdale, where I worked for about 5 years. And then when I retired, I didn't want to stop doing things. And so I then chaired a couple of safeguarding adults boards. I chaired North Yorkshire's for a few years. And now I chair Bradford, so that's how I got here. So very committed to disabled people, disabled rights, and really making sure that the person who needs the support is right at the centre of what professionals are doing.
Got it. So, I mean, at the moment, here we are. What's the focus, would you say, at the moment? What are a couple of points of focus for you at the moment within the adult board, and within the whole landscape of adult safeguarding in Bradford?
Well, I think that following on from what I was saying just before, the absolute focus is what's become a phrase that can sometimes just become a meaningless phrase, which is making safeguarding personal. And that's a national initiative, and the principles of that around putting the person at the centre of whatever you're doing with them is actually now enshrined in legislation, which is really good. And it actually marks quite a big change in the way in which people with care needs who are at risk are being supported. There was a lot of research done a few years ago, mainly with disabled people who'd experienced safeguarding issues. And the really big message that came out from them was that they felt that they'd got caught up in a process where they'd been subject to investigations, they'd been subject to police investigations, maybe people had been prosecuted, and they lost control of what was going on. And rather than feeling actually safeguarded and protected by the services, they actually felt more at risk as a result of what seemed to be this uncontrollable steamroller going forward. So now we're really trying to work out with people when risks are identified, either by them or very often it's by carers or family. What do they want? What will actually help them to feel safer, which might not be what the professionals want at all. So, for example, you get situations where somebody might be being financially abused by a relative, and the professionals might think, well, that person's been exploited and they ought to be prosecuted. But actually maybe an older person says, well, I don't want that to happen because, I don't like what they've done to me in terms of my money, but actually I need them and I love them and I want to keep in contact with them. So no, I don't want them to be prosecuted. Now that's very hard sometimes for professionals to actually listen to and say, right, okay, maybe there's another way round there. It's a bit more risky to do it. And that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do now, which means a change of thought, not just for social workers, but for police, for doctors, for nursing staff, for everybody who's working in the sector, really.
Financial abuse is very much an issue and a problem for the adult safeguarding world, in the sense that it's one of the few areas that doesn't figure hugely in children's safeguarding. But there are quite a few overlaps, aren't there? There are quite a few areas where the safeguarding world and children and adults do kind of overlap. I'm thinking of mental health issues, I'm thinking of domestic abuse, or maybe substance abuse, where a child in a household where these are an issue is hugely affected, and so both of us get interested with that.
I think that's right, and I think a particular area is sexual abuse, which and sexual exploitation, which often gets called child sexual exploitation. And whenever I hear that phrase, I say no, it's not just child. It's people can be sexually exploited as children and as adults. And there's a lot of work that we can do together around that. And indeed in Bradford we are. I think one of the really positive things that's happening is that the hub around sexual exploitation is now connected up to the adult safeguarding team, so they meet on a weekly basis, and they pick up issues, and that's particularly important, I think, around people with learning disability who can sometimes be targeted by people who in the past maybe have targeted children and move on to other vulnerable people. So we need to be aware all the time that people's modus operandi changes, particularly in areas where it is a bit organised and people connect up and have networked. So having those links, making sure that people in the adult safeguarding system learn from the experience of what's happened in children's safeguarding, and then take that intelligence in there and track people forward, I think is really, really important. And there's some good things happening in Bradford.
Well, both for your board and for me chairing the children's board, I mean, that's very much a crossover area, isn't it? We're both in the business of protecting the vulnerable.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so some of the other issues at the moment that seem to be fairly dominant within your board's work, what would you like us to sort of think about?
Well, I think another area that is dominant always in safeguarding adults is what happens to people when they're in care settings. And that's probably another difference between safeguarding adults and safeguarding children's priorities, in that there are a lot of older people and a lot of people, particularly with learning disabilities, still in some kind of residential or institutionalised care of one sort or another, much more than there are with children. And those people are vulnerable, particularly where settings are fairly closed and it's difficult to get in. And although regulation has opened that out a bit, there are still a lot of risks around that. And there are still too many examples of poor care that kind of leaches into abusive care going on, and the quality of care in lots of places, and West Yorkshire is not one of the best, is not as good as it could be. But there's some Bradford. I'm really pleased that in Bradford, the local authority has really taken a grip around this, and they've moved from what was a bit of a haphazard process of deciding when you stopped placing people maybe in an old people's home because you had concerns about it, to something that's much more systematic, much more open and much more transparent, so that the local authority, working together with the NHS, says very clearly now to care homes, what you're doing is not acceptable. We're not going to place any more people there. You've got to do this, this and this to improve. And when you've improved, we'll start to place again. And I get notified as the chair of each one of those decisions. And what I've noticed is that there was a period of time where most of my notifications were about embargoes starting. And now I'm getting more notifications of embargoes finishing
Okay.
because the quality of service
Positive
has improved.
stuff, though.
So that's really, really
Yeah.
good, and I think there are probably other authorities that can learn from that kind of systematic process.
Well, it sounds like Bradford and West Yorkshire is getting its act together on that and learning lessons. And that's what we want to hear, because I'm sure the people of Bradford can be a bit more reassured about who's looking after the elderly and the vulnerable. So, I mean, what other sort of positive initiatives would you say are going on at the moment in your world?
Well, I think one of the initiatives again that's going on in Bradford and is beginning to happen elsewhere more is trying to involve people who use services much more, both in the appraisal of the services and in improving the infrastructure around them. So in Bradford, we have the Safeguarding Voices group, which is a group of people with care and support needs. So that's people with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, older people, who come together and advise the board about issues that are going on and things that they think need to be addressed. And also make a constructive contribution. So, for example, we recently produced a leaflet, an easy guide to what to do if you notice that you think is somebody at risk. And the Safeguarding Voices group had a major input into the design of that. They're helping us at the moment with a redesign of our website. And as you know, David, we've got this exciting Bradford Safeguarding Week coming up soon, and one of the key things about that is that the Bradford Voices group will be touring around Bradford doing some training around how to recognise abuse of people with care and support needs.
Such a reassurance sometimes to get a consumer group that actually is regularly meeting and talking, because often people are so busy or so consumed with problems or issues in their own lives that the amount of time they can give to sort of civic involvement is limited. But it sounds very much as if you've made great strides there with the consumer group that you've got and the Voices group. And so good luck to that. So, I mean, all of these sound pretty positive things. I mean, what other initiatives are going on that you would be quite keen to sort of promote and let the people of Bradford hear about?
Well, I think that one really interesting thing that's recently been started, that's actually been led by the members training. So that's the people responsible for developing the skills of counsellors in Bradford. Is a series of short video clips done by actors, but based on people's real experiences of being involved in safeguarding. And there's quite a few around safeguarding adults, and there's quite a few around safeguarding children as well. And I think that's a really exciting thing to do. It's open access, so people can log on it, and there's questions and discussions that can go on. So it's useful for professionals, it's useful for counsellors, it's useful for really anybody who's interested, including people who use services as well, just to think a bit about, well, so how would I respond to what are some really quite tricky situations? And that's called real life stories, real safeguarding stories.
How do people access that?
If they just Google real safeguarding stories, then it should come up. I checked it this morning before I came along today, and it worked. So
it's Bradford specific.
Yeah, it's been done in Bradford in a partnership with a trading company, but it's not just for Bradford people. You can just Google it and it will come up. Yeah, and I think that again that follows that theme of let's try and look at this from the perspective of people who have experienced abuse. Maybe they've been a neighbour and they've heard it going on next door, or maybe it's happened to them or their relatives, etc. So it's the whole time trying to get inside the heads of people who are living it in one way or another day to day, not just coming at it from a professional perspective.
It's always been a difficult place, the area of transition from childhood to adulthood. And if we had in the children's sort of sector somebody who was quite vulnerable and who was going to continue to be vulnerable as they entered adulthood, obviously, they would be coming onto your radar.
Yeah.
I mean, my view is that we've developed a lot more positive ways of sharing this information. But I'm sure there's even more ways that we could improve things in the future. I mean, do you want to sort of mull over that for a minute and sort of talk about your thoughts on that? I mean, it is good the way we're doing it, but it could obviously be better. So how would you like to address that?
I think you're right. I think there have been considerable strides, and there's a lot of structures being put in place, and there are certainly in Bradford now. There's a post that focuses on transitions and people's move. I actually don't particularly like the word transition, because transition is a service base. It's like moving from children's services to adult services, and I think we should come up with another word, a development or something that's much more positive, really. Where I think that that there's a lot more work to do around it is often helping the parents think about what life is going to be as their child moves into adulthood. There's a very natural tendency to want to continue to support and maybe nurture a childhood dependence into adulthood. And that can often, in the longer term, not be in the learning disabled person, for example's best interests. And I think where we've got more work to do around that transition is to help parents see what the future might be in terms of managing personal budgets and enabling younger people to live outside of kind of institutional care, because there are some really great educational services for children and up to the age of 18 and sometimes beyond, but sometimes those actually aren't sustainable for somebody's whole life. Financially, they are phenomenally expensive, and one can't ignore that, although that's not a prima facie reason for changing people's services. You can have you can see experiences of change. For example, when I was in Calderdale, we reconfigured the support services for learning disabled people, and we closed some traditional day services and replaced them with supporting people being in normal occupations and that kind of thing. And there was a lot of resistance
more
to
natural
that from people. Yeah, much more kind of integrated.
Yeah.
But when we started to do it, understandably, because people couldn't see how it was going to be, there was a lot of resistance to that. Some of it quite vitriolic. But actually, some of the most vitriolic people actually came back afterwards and said, well, now it's happened and now I see what my child is doing. This is so much better than what was happening before. So there's I think one of the other things that you need to have courage as counsellors and as professionals, that sometimes actually from what we know around evidence, we have to take things on and try and change things, even though we know that the people who are being changed aren't going to be happy about it.
And sometimes people really do need to just experience something to really understand what the benefits are.
That's absolutely.
Well, look, as a kind of a last point here, I mean, we will put some details about how to contact the Adult Safeguarding Board on the text to do with this. But generally speaking, what would your message to the people of Bradford be to do with adult safeguarding in the city? I mean, we've talked about quite a few good, positive initiatives, and I think that I would love to reflect that, because I do feel that we are progressing this.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would your message be about how to support the people of Bradford?
Well, I think it sounds a bit of a cliche, but it is really important to say that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. What that means in practice is that, say, for example, you have got a relative who is in a care home and you go in there and you think, well, I wouldn't want to live in here. This just doesn't feel quite right to me. Do something about it. Address it with the care home itself. If you feel that they're unresponsive, then contact the local authority, the social worker who placed the person there, or safeguarding adults if you're really concerned about that. If you're very, very concerned, then obviously you need to contact the police. But don't just stand back and think, well, I suppose it's okay. Actually, do something about it. And I think the same goes for seeing families in distress. Don't turn the other way, but actually think about, well, how might it be possible to help them if people are really struggling with an older person with dementia or something like that. So it's let's all work on this together, I think.
Very good message. I mean, and ultimately it's a case of, we know you care, let us help you care.
That's right, yeah, good way of saying it.
Fine.
Yes.
Jonathan, many thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Pleasure, David.
Okay.
Good to have chatted to you.